Welcome to part 2 of our voiceover lecture for Chapter 4 on skin and body membranes. In part 1, we already discussed the body membranes. We also discussed the integumentary system's functions and the layers of our skin. In part 2, we'll discuss the physiology of human skin color, and we'll go through the various accessory organs of our skin. In part 3, we'll discuss problems and diseases and disorders of the skin, including skin cancer. Section 4, Skin Color. There are many factors that contribute to the skin color of an individual. One of these factors is the pigments. One major category of pigment is melanin. Melanin is formed from the amino acid tyrosine in our melanocytes. There are two forms of melanin, eumelanin and pheomelanin. Eumelanin imparts a brown-black color to the skin, and pheomelanin imparts a yellow-reddish hue to the skin. Another major pigment that contributes to skin color is hemoglobin. In individuals with lighter skin tones and in lighter regions of the body, hemoglobin can contribute a reddish or pinkish hue to the skin. Hemoglobin is found below the skin within the red blood cells in our blood. Hemoglobin is the molecule that carries oxygen from our lungs to the tissues of the body. Finally, we have keratin. Keratin imparts a yellow-orange hue to the skin. We must obtain keratin from our diet because we cannot make it in our cells. Keratin is a precursor of vitamin A and is essential for vision. Previously, we discussed how melanocytes are present in the stratum basale of the epidermis of the skin, and that they impart an important protective function by passing on melanin to the surrounding keratinocytes. Now, how does this actually occur? Melanocytes package melanin into little bubbles or vesicles called melanosomes. Melanosomes empty their contents outside of the cell through a process known as exocytosis. The surrounding keratinocytes pick up the melanin, bring it into their cells. They take the melanin and they form a cap over their nucleus, kind of like a tiny parasol. That nuclear cap prevents UV light from penetrating into the nucleus and damaging the DNA. Most individuals have the same number of melanocytes, no matter the skin color. This is a drawing of the upper layers of the skin. Down below we have the dermis, and above we have the epidermis. The bottom layer of the epidermis is the stratum basale, and in that layer you can see a melanocyte. Notice the cellular extensions or tentacle-like projections that come out of the melanocyte that allows it to come into contact with many keratinocytes. Within the melanocyte you can see the brown-black specks. Those represent melanosomes filled with melanin. The melanin will be released out of the melanocyte cell and taken up by neighboring keratinocytes. Here you can see melanin in this keratinocyte here. The melanin will be packaged into a cap-like structure that will cover the upper surface of the nucleus, protecting the DNA below from UV damage. Remember, there are two types of melanin, eumelanin and pheomelanin. Eumelanin confers a brown-black color. People with darker skin tend to have more of eumelanin. They also tend to have larger and more numerous melanosomes in their skin. Due to that additional pigment, people with darker skin tend to have better natural UV protection. People with lighter skin tend to have more pheomelanin, and due to deeper light penetration in people with lighter skin, you tend to be able to see the red hues of the hemoglobin in the blood below. The production of vitamin D in the skin relies on ultraviolet light. Due to better light penetration, individuals with lighter skin tend to produce more vitamin D in regions of the globe that receive less UV exposure, like those of northern latitudes. And thus, skin color is related to latitude. This is a map of global ultraviolet light exposure across the Earth. The color reds and purples show more intense ultraviolet light exposure. You can see there being more UV light on equatorial regions of the Earth, and in northern latitudes, the blues and grays represent less ultraviolet light exposure. Here is a map of human skin color, with a gradient of darker skin pigmentation at the equator and progressively lighter pigmentations as you approach the poles. Research has shown that this correlates with the amount of UV exposure. Scientist Nina Jablonski, who put together these maps, has done interesting research in the evolution of human skin color. Recent research by Nina Jablonski and her colleagues has shown that light penetration in the skin affects the amount of folate, or folic acid, in the body. It turns out that folic acid is destroyed by light, and thus people with darker pigmentation retain higher amounts of folic acid. Folic acid, or vitamin B9, is essential for human health. Section 5. Accessory structures of the skin. So far we've discussed the layers of human skin, the epidermis, dermis, and hypodermis, but there are also additional little organs or accessory structures found in our integumentary system. These are sometimes known as the appendages of the skin. These structures develop from the epidermis, usually from the stratum basale, and include glands, hair, and our nails. There are 4 main types of glands found in the skin. Let's begin by talking about sebaceous glands. Sebaceous glands produce an oily substance known as sebum. The role of sebum is to keep skin soft and moist, protecting it from cracking and thus from bacterial infections. Sebum also keeps our hair pliable, protecting it from becoming brittle and thus breaking. Sebum is associated with the follicles of our hair and usually empties into hair follicles. The next major category of integumentary glands is the sudoriferous glands. Sudoriferous glands are also known as sweat glands. There are 2 major categories of sudoriferous glands, the eccrine and apocrine glands. Eccrine glands produce a type of sweat that contains more water and salt and is thus better suited for thermoregulation, keeping us cool when we're hot. Eccrine glands are distributed all over our bodies. The next type is apocrine glands, which produce a type of sweat that contains more fat. This fat provides food for bacteria, and as they feed on that fat, they produce a distinct odor, thus contributing to human body odor. Apocrine glands are limited to just certain regions of our body, including our scalp, forehead, armpits, and groin regions. You can see in this drawing, eccrine glands empty to the surface of the skin directly, whereas apocrine glands are associated with hair follicles and empty into hair follicles. The third type of skin gland is called the ceruminous gland. Ceruminous glands produce cerumen, or earwax. Ceruminous glands are located in our ear canals. Finally, we have mammary glands. Mammary glands are the glands that produce human milk. We will further discuss mammary glands in the reproductive system chapter. The next type of accessory structure of the skin is hair. Hair can be described as follows. Hair is composed of columns of dead keratinized epidermal cells, very similar to the upper layers of our epidermis. Hair is distributed all over our external body, except for the palms of our hands and soles of our feet. The distribution and type of hair on our body changes with human development and the hormones that we produce. Now let's discuss the anatomy of our hair. Hair is made up of 2 major parts. The hair shaft is the superficial part, the part that projects above the skin, the part that we can see. The hair root is the deeper part, the part that penetrates deep into the dermis. Our hair is divided into 3 distinct layers. Let's begin with the medulla. Medulla means middle, and thus the medulla is the central core of the hair. The medulla is made up of several rows of irregularly shaped cells and associated air spaces. Surrounding the medulla is the cortex. The bulk of our hair is composed of cortex. And then finally, we have the outermost layer called the cuticle. The cuticle is composed of a single layer of cells that overlap each other like the shingles on a roof. In this drawing, you can see the 3 layers of the hair. The middle is the medulla, outside of that is the cortex, and the outermost layer is the cuticle. Why do we have hair? What is its function? Our hair protects us from UV light, especially on the top of our heads. Our hair protects us from the entry of foreign particles. For example, eyelashes and eyebrows protect our eyes, and our ear and nose canals are protected by hairs in those areas. Our hair gives us a little bit of insulation, especially on the top of our heads. And our hairs are wrapped with dendrites from neurons, and thus our hairs can detect light touching sensations. Now let's discuss our hair follicles. Hair follicles surround the roots of our hairs. Hair follicles are composed of 2 major layers. First, the epithelial root sheath is the inner portion of the follicle. It's the part that actually comes in contact with the hair root. The epithelial root sheath is composed of epithelial cells. Surrounding that is the fibrous sheath. The fibrous sheath is composed of dermal connective tissue and helps supply blood vessels to the underlying epithelial root sheath. At the base of the hair follicle is a structure called the hair bulb. This is the onion-shaped part of the follicle. I like to think of our hairs as being shaped kind of like green onions. The bulbous area of the green onion is like the hair bulb. Our hair follicles also contain a structure called the hair papilla. It's an indentation into the base of the hair. The hair papilla is composed of connective tissue and blood vessels. This provides nutrients and oxygen to the growing hair. Also within the hair follicle is a single layer of dividing cells called the hair matrix. These are the cells that give rise to the hair. This diagram shows the important structures of our hair follicles. Here in pink you can see the hair root. The white layer of the hair root is the cuticle. The pink layer of the hair root is the hair cortex, and the medulla is the yellow layer. Surrounding the hair root is the hair follicle. The hair follicle was divided into 2 layers. The layer that comes in contact with the hair was the epithelial root sheath, and that's composed, as you can see, of epithelial cells. Outside of that is the fibrous sheath, which is composed of connective tissue. Also within the hair follicle are certain structures. This swollen region here at the base of the hair is the hair bulb. This projection of connective tissue into the base of the hair is the hair papilla. What's not depicted here is the blood vessels that would come up and help feed the growing hair. Finally, we have the hair matrix, this single layer of cells which is continuous with the stratum basale of the epidermis and is thus composed of very similar cells. So there are growing, dividing stem cells that give rise to the rest of the hair, and melanocytes that help contribute to hair color. Now let's discuss the physiology of hair growth. As we talked about, the hair matrix is part of the stratum basale of the epidermis. Remember, that was the layer that contained stem cells. Thus, the hair matrix contains dividing cells. As those cells divide, new cells are pushed upwards, and old cells are thus also pushed upwards, and the process of keratinization begins. This process is very similar to what we saw in the epidermis. One of our most conspicuous features is our hair color. Like in our skin, melanocytes contribute to our hair color. The melanocytes of our hair are found in the hair matrix. Melanocytes produce melanin, That melanin is transferred to cells in the medulla and cortex of our hair. It's the combination of the two different types of melanin that confer a hair color. That is, eumelanin, which produces the brown-black color, and pheomelanin, which gives the yellow-red hair color. As we age, melanocytes stop producing melanin, thus giving us gray hair. Additionally, air bubbles accumulate in the shaft of our hairs, which confers a sort of shiny color. Now let's discuss the physiology of goosebumps. Erector pili muscles are attached from the hair bulb up to the superficial surface of the dermis of the skin. When those muscles are relaxed, our hair lies at an acute angle to the skin, that is, an angle less than 90 degrees. When those muscles contract, this pulls our hair upright. It's this push and pull on the hair bulb and the dermis of the skin that gives the appearance of bumps. Triggers of goosebumps include exposure to cold and our fight or flight response. The third and final accessory structure of our skin are our nails. Nails can be described as follows. They are scale-like modifications of the epidermis. Our nails are solid, clear coverings that cover the distal and dorsal portion of our digits being our fingers and toes. There are several anatomical structures of the nail that you should know. The nail body is the visible attached portion of our nail, this region here. The free edge is the white unattached portion of our nail, the part that you clip off as the nail grows. The nail root is buried in a fold of skin and can be seen here in the picture to the right. The lunule is the proximal white crescent of the nail. Lunule means little moon. And then finally, the cuticle is the fold of skin that comes up on the proximal portion of our nail. The cuticle is also known as the eponychium. Now let's discuss the physiology of our nails. The stratum basale extends under the nail, and this is called the nail bed. The proximal portion of the nail bed is known as the nail matrix. This is the region with rapidly dividing cells. These cells produce new nail cells. Our nails grow roughly about 1 millimeter per week. Fun fact, the longer the digit, the faster the nails grow. You might have noticed this in that our toenails grow much slower than our fingernails. What are the functions or purpose of our nails? Our nails help protect the distal ends of our digits. Our nails provide support for the ends of our digits. Our nails help us manipulate small objects and can be used for grooming.